All right, I told him, don't do it. And he said, but Dad, look at this ad. The car looks so good. I said, don't do it. And then he says, but look, it's got so few miles on it. Don't do it. But look, it even comes with its owner's manual, and it's a 97. Don't do it. But Dad, I've already reserved a U-Haul trailer. Jacob, just don't do it. I don't have the time. But Dad, I already picked it up. And then guess what? He just did it. He just did it. He just did it. He did it. All right, that's enough of the stupidity for now. So let's get down to business here. Let me explain what that was kind of about anyway. My son, Jacob, is usually the one that finds the cars and the projects that I work on. And after the 97 Cobra, which took quite a bit of time, it was a big project, I told him that, I need to kind of divert my attention away from cars for a while because there's other things in my life that's getting neglected, like the house and the yard and a number of other things. So I said, please no more cars for now. And he's just kind of a gearhead. He loves cars, and he's always looking for cars, and he just couldn't resist, especially on this one because it was such a good deal. This particular rig here, we got for $500, believe it or not. It has brand new tires on it. The tires alone are worth that. So I have to admit, he did get a good deal here, just that I didn't really want to spend time working on another car quite yet. And after this one's done, I probably won't until next fall or winter when things kind of slow down. And so anyway, this is what we're left with here. And so let me show you what we actually have here. We have a 97 Kia Sportage. And this one was a pretty good deal. My son picked it up for about $500. And you see there's one of two things, or maybe two things that make a car cheap. And one is cosmetics. So, if it has body damage or it's rusted or something like that, that can make it cheap. And the other is, of course, mechanical. So anyway, as you look at this, it looks pretty darn good. So why was this such a good deal? It's mechanical, and it's all under that hood. Let me show you what we got going on here. All right, so the story on this rig is the previous owner apparently picked this up at an auction. And at that time, it wasn't running very well, but it was running, and he was able to drive it around. And since he bought it at the auction, he had put 159 miles on it. And since it was running so poorly, he decided to do the timing on the vehicle. And I'm not exactly sure why he thought the timing would be the solution to the problem. Maybe he found that it had skipped a tooth or something. But there's so many things it could potentially be. And so I'm not even sure when we get this back up and running and timed properly that it's going to run right. We still may have some issues to deal with. But anyway, after he did the timing job on it, he fired it up and it made a horrible noise. And he turned it off immediately, and that's the last time that it ran. So anyway, what we're told by that owner is that there's most likely an issue with the valves being bent. He thinks that there is some contact between the piston and the valve. And anyways, you may or may not know, if the engine's not timed right, with an interference motor, which most motors are today, and an interference motor is when the piston comes up high enough to hit the valve. So you got the piston kind of coming up and down like this, and then you got the valve coming in like this, and if it's not timed quite right, and that looks kind of not good. Jacob, delete this clip, please. Okay, Dad. All right, that's enough kidding around. I promise you, no more kidding around for the rest of this video. We're gonna get super serious. So anyway, interference motor, it's when you have a potential for the piston to hit the valve. We think that's what happened after the guy completed the timing on this. And we think it was just off a little bit, not a whole lot, but just enough to make the piston hit the valve. But it was good enough to actually make it run because he supposedly was running the engine, and it was making a terrible noise. So what we think at this point was he fired it up, and the pistons came up and hit the valves when they come down, and then bent them. And then since the valve was bent, it wouldn't go back up and close. And the reason we think that is because now when we take this belt off, we can spin both of these cams freely, which means it's not compressing the spring anymore. So we think the valves are stuck into the head. And the other thing is, when we try to turn the crank, it turns freely to a point. It'll turn and then it hits something. Well, we think it's hitting one of the valves that's stuck in the down position. So First order of business is to get this intake off. What I'd like to do is pull the spark plugs out, and we'll put a borescope down there and see if we can find any evidence on top of the pistons with the valve hitting them. So let's go ahead and get this off and take a look. Okay, we got the intake portion off that goes over the valve cover, and that leaves us with this cover that goes over the coils and the spark plugs. And looks like we only have 3 of the 6 bolts that hold that down. So let's go ahead and remove that. I can just pull this off. There we go. Oh, this is really kind of an odd setup here. Looks like they got one coil pack feeding 2 of the spark plugs. So we're only gonna have to remove 2 coil packs. And this first one here on cylinder number 1 looks like it's real easy to get access to. So this is the one that we'll check first. Just pull that out, and then we'll go ahead and remove that plug. I'll put the borescope down there and see what the condition of that piston looks like. Okay, this is really odd. I just pulled out the spark plug connector there, and then if we look down here into the hole, we see no spark plug. Odd. Wonder if there's a spark plug in any of these. So anyway, let's go ahead and get our scope down there and see what we can find. There's the top of the piston. I see the cutouts there for the valves. And you know what? This actually looks to be fine. There's nothing real obvious right here. Actually, this looks to be pretty decent. I don't see any damage to the surface of that piston. Let's take a look at the other 3. There's a lot of missing bolts in here, that's for sure. Every time I pull something else out, there's another missing bolt. There's one holding that in, but nothing over here on this side. So let's go ahead and take that out. Any guesses as to whether there's any spark plugs in these 2 cylinders? Does not look like it. Definitely not in that one. Nope, so all these plugs have been removed. I'm surprised they put it back together with that many plugs in there. Okay, so let's go take a look in the next 2. That piston is up, so it's kind of hard to see the full thing. Yeah, I'm gonna have to turn the crank and move those down so I can get a look at the whole piston. To find where the piston's down at the bottom, I'm going to put this little grabber thing in there in the spark plug hole until it hits the top of the piston. And then we'll just turn the crank until it goes down as far as it can go. There we go. And that would be pretty good. So now let's take a look with the borescope. Well, I'm actually kind of surprised. I'm not seeing anything, which I guess is good, but those valves have to be stuck in the open position. Otherwise, you'd be able to turn that crank all the way, unless we threw a rod or something. Maybe there's something down by the crank that's keeping it from rotating. But let's take a look at the last one, and then I guess we're going to start disassembling the head and getting it off, and we'll take a look and see what the underside of this head looks like. Okay. This one looks really oily. Yeah, if you take a look at this one, looks very, very oily down there. Unfortunately, I'm not able with this borescope anyway to look back up at the valves. Unfortunately, there are some that enable you to do that. I just have never purchased one. So anyway, we're gonna pull this head. So I guess I don't really care at this point. Let's just get busy here and get this head off. Now, I did want to show you what I mean here about spinning these cams freely. Let's just get this timing belt off here. And you can see here, I mean, it's effortless to spin these. So there's no valve springs being compressed. And again, the crank, it'll turn maybe half a turn, then something hits and can't go any further. Next order of business is we'll take off this intake. And I always like to shoot a little bit of video before removing stuff, just so I know where things go. like these vacuum lines here. That's all gonna come off, this is gonna come off. So anyway, that's one of the nice things about doing YouTube videos. Everything's kind of documented, and when you have to put things back together, you got a pretty good inventory and log of all the parts, where they go, and how they need to go back together. Actually, before I take the intake off, I think it'd be still pretty easy and straightforward just to get the valve covers off. So let's just take that off first and see if that reveals anything. Just went ahead and pulled all the bolts that hold the valve cover on. So let's go and pull that off and see what it reveals. You know, this is a real interesting too. I just pulled that off. I see no gasket around there. And then if you look on the underside of this guy, there's still no gasket. Whoa, why is there no bucket lifters on there? There's literally nothing there. I believe there's supposed to be some bucket lifters down there. So that is why this thing spins so freely. As you can see, the cam there never really comes in contact with anything. I'm beginning to have a different theory as to what's going on. That's odd too. Look at that. But there's no plug there or anything. How is that going to prevent oil from getting out the back? This is, boy, I don't know. But there's got to be some way to seal that. That's crazy. Let's get the cams off and we'll get a better look. I guess the thing about this, the thing that's a little more concerning is we didn't see any evidence of the pistons hitting valves. So the pistons look good, that's great, but that doesn't explain why the crank doesn't turn. So now I'm thinking maybe something on the bottom end of the motor is broken, or maybe it's throwing a rod, bent rod or something, I don't know. So anyway, let's just keep going here. You know what, guys, I got the flashlight out and I'm looking in here now, and now I'm realizing that when we look in here, we don't even have any valves. If you look, there's the valve guide right there, but there's no valves in there. So either they fell in, which I don't believe, because we didn't see anything with the bore scope in there. So I don't know what's going on here. Now, before we pull these cam caps here, it's very important that these go back in the same position, in the same orientation. And if you look closely here, you'll see that each one of these caps has a marking. So there's E for the exhaust side, and then they're numbered. So there's E2, E3, E4, and E5. And then over on the other side, we got I, I2, I3, I4, and I5. So we're not going to have to mark these since they're already pre-marked, but when we do put them back, we have to make sure that they go back in the same way they came out. Okay, I haven't touched anything yet here, and I just wanted to show you that, look at this. These are loose, they're not torqued down. So I'm not, kind of not believing that story where he turned it over, made a horrible noise, he shut it off, and then that's it. Obviously, it wasn't going to run the way it is. There's no valves, there's no spark plugs, nothing's torqued down properly. I think he took it apart and found something more major and just kind of slapped it back together and then gave us a story. Okay, now that we have all the cam caps off, let's go ahead and pull the cams. Now, I just want to double check before I pull this off completely and make sure that we don't get the exhaust and the intake cam confused. And as you can see here, you can't. It's got label EX there for the exhaust and IN for the intake. Now, I didn't pull off the sprockets. I don't think it's necessary. I was able to take the bolts from this cover through these little holes here. So I'm just going to lift both of the cams out and the plate all together as one unit. All right, we have to be real careful with these cams so that we don't damage them. Okay, there we go. With the cams removed, we can get a good look in here now. And as you can see here, it's very clear. We got no valves, no springs, no bucket lifters, nothing. All that valve train is completely gone. So we know for sure that the valves weren't stuck open and it's not the piston hitting the open valve. So something else is going on in the bottom part of the motor that's preventing the crank from spinning, and that's what scares the heck out of me. So anyway, we'll go ahead and continue just pulling this off. Even the heads are not in that great a shape. If we look at these cam caps, a lot of them have pretty significant scoring in there. That's not good. So I think there's definitely some debris floating around in this motor before it gave up. And it's probably something on the bottom side of the motor that gave way and caused metal or some debris to flow through this motor, and then got in there and scored things up. So I don't know. We'll go ahead and continue to tear it down. It almost looks like as if though this head is reversible. And I found it really peculiar that we got what reveals what looks like another cam cap there. And there's nothing plugging that hole, so I'm wondering what it goes back to that prevents the oil from sloshing out of here. We definitely don't have all the parts. We know we have some missing bolts. Now we got missing valve train. Wow, this looks like a big mess. It wouldn't surprise me if we end up just buying another motor and putting it in. Okay, I just took the 2 out of the 4 bolts that would normally hold this on. So it looks like any bolts that are a little difficult to get to just didn't go back in. So the heat shield should just come off now. And there we go. And what does that reveal? Of course, more missing header bolts. This thing has a lot of bolts that are just missing. Okay, I loosened all the head bolts, and they were not torqued down at all. So apparently the guy had taken this thing apart and just kind of slapped it back together and really didn't bother about torquing anything back down. So it's still going to be real interesting to see what we find at the bottom part of the motor. There's definitely something wrong there. But anyway, for right now, let's get this head off and we'll take a look at the top of the pistons and see what kind of shape they're in. Okay, I'm hoping that we can just now lift this head off. Let's give it a shot. Oh boy. I'm gonna have to pull this exhaust manifold back first. There we go. There's something still attached back there. Okay, I'm glad we're not gonna have to salvage any of this because, oh boy, I'm probably scoring up the bottom of that head. But as you can see, there's under the intake manifold, there's a number of other connections that are extremely difficult to get to. So I separated the intake from the head, and now I'm gonna have to pull those tubes off. Then I should be able to remove the head completely. All right, I got those 2 tubes coming off from the oil filter housing. So hopefully we can just lift this intake away now. Oh no, it's not gonna be that simple. There's some other things connected to it. I can't believe it. Well, this is one of the problems not being familiar with an engine. You don't really know what to expect. So anyway, I got the other hose disconnected from the head. So hopefully we can just lift this out now. Finally, we got it. There we go. Okay, finally. That's quite a chore. So we've gotten a little further, but this still does not answer the question, is why won't the crankshaft turn 360 degrees? I still believe there's something at the bottom of the motor causing some problems. These pistons here look to be okay. Everything's disconnected here from the intake, so it's just a matter of pulling it out. You just kind of have to carefully maneuver it out of here because of this one pipe that I did not disconnect. That was kind of hanging on everything, which is this guy here. And then of course this wiring harness I need to kind of feed through here and get it out of the way. And everything should be free. Okay. There we go. I can tell you one thing, this engine's going back together outside of the car. And if we do reassemble this motor, it's going to be done outside of the vehicle. everything's just too tight. There's too many things underneath the intake that need to be hooked up. And just maneuvering through here is really difficult. You know, I'm sure that this engine isn't as bad as I'm making out to be. If you were familiar with this engine and knew where you were going, it probably isn't quite this bad. But boy, if you've never worked on one of these before, I'm really used to the Subaru motors and Ford motors. This is completely different. The other ones have some challenges as well, but at least I know where I'm going with those motors. This is really all new to me. So let's look at the bottom side here of the head. And here, let's bring you a little closer so you can see. All right. You know, it doesn't look as if there's any damage under here. It's kind of dirty, but I don't really see anything. Of course, we won't really know until we get some valves and see if those valve guides are worn or not. But, you know, this car does not have many miles on it, so I would think that they would be in pretty good shape still. So, anyway, yeah, still got a lot of work ahead of us. All right, guys, I'm old and I'm getting tired. So I think I'm going to call it quits here on this video. We've still got a fair amount of work to do ahead of us. There's still a problem here with the bottom side of the motor. I was thinking about just removing the motor. It's going to have to come out anyway, but I think what I'm going to do instead is just raise the car up and we'll pull the oil pan off and just see what it reveals. You know, that could tell us a lot of the story. So anyway, we'll do that on the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.